There you go. We'll see if the foundation's going to shake. That's it. Yep. Well, we started talking about some of these things last week by way of tactics and some of the things that we mentioned. Um, there were 3 skills we said that were necessary to represent the Lord, and we talked about we talked about those 3 skills. And then we talked about the first rule of engagement, making sure that we are sensitive when rhetoric becomes a substitute for substance. In other words, when people give us their canned responses to things, as opposed to anything that that can actually be supported. Sometimes that's what folks will do, is they'll give you their canned answer, and then you ask them to define what they mean by that, and that's when they start to stumble all over the place because they don't know anything outside of the canned response that they've been conditioned to give you. But one of the things that is true about tactics is that tactics allow us to be in the driver's seat and to manage the conversation. The example that I gave last time about the guy who was interviewing the Wiccan girl, he was in complete control of that entire conversation, and he was simply asking questions. And any statement that he would make was in the form of a question. And what that did was that put the responsibility of defending a position completely on the girl. He didn't have to defend anything. That's a tactic. Something that is important for us to understand is that even though we have filled our bookshelves, so to speak, with good Christian material to deal decisively with every possible answer or question about classical Christianity, knowledge is one thing, but being able to purvey that knowledge is a completely different kettle of fish. In other words, it's not so much what you say as how you say it in so many cases. Something that is still missing is, the example, of course, is that of a good lawyer. A good lawyer needs more than just facts in order to make a case, right? A good lawyer needs to know how to use his knowledge well, how to present those facts and to wrap those facts up into a specific package that looks and feels in such a manner that is going to impact the audience. And in his case, of course, it would be the jury or the judge. We need to be able to do the same thing. To have a plan to manage very carefully and very specifically the details of our conversations with others. In other words, you don't always share the same facts the same way. Now think about that for a minute, and I'm not saying that we change the facts, no. I'm saying sometimes we change our approach. Just a crude example, one of my overly familiar mantras that I gave again this morning. Standing in your garage doesn't make you a car. Sitting in church doesn't make you a Christian, okay? That works great for a lot of people, but that might be a complete turnoff to someone who is shall we say, intellectually sophisticated, way up here somewhere. Okay, some PhD, blah, 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 blah. Okay, they might look at that as being beneath them. And I would present that same fact a different way, perhaps, for someone in that position. Um, you know, we see this so often as it parallels our lives, um, where tactics are literally the art of arranging focus on the situation at hand. How we look at things from a certain perspective. Um, we've all had personal experiences of where the gospel can change someone's life. But how do we design specific responses for specific people so we can have an impact in specific situations? Let's say, for example, we have a coworker who is having a difficult time with some financial issues. We'll just paint that picture out there. And they find themselves in over their head, and in the course of conversation, this comes up between you and that person. How would you respond to that person as opposed to, say, a neighbor who has just been diagnosed with a very challenging, life-threatening disease? Now, we know that the same fact is true. And the fact that we'll use, for example, is not only the sovereignty of God, but the goodness and the love of God, and the ability of God to meet needs. How would you present that to the coworker differently than you would present to the neighbor? Hmm? Hmm? Okay. Yeah, with a neighbor, you would know a neighbor differently perhaps than you would know a coworker. So a lot of it has to do with depth of relationship. And that determines what kinds of things you can say and not say. Sure, that's true. What else? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you kind of have to tiptoe around that, or it has to be, on the lunch hour when you're clocked out, or before or after work, stopping off for a cup of coffee or something like that. Sure. But you get the idea. The idea is that your presentation in certain situations can be completely different. Something that is true about a tactical approach, and again, keeping in mind that tactics are different than strategies. For example, a strategy would be what Eisenhower and his staff put together for the D-Day invasion. That was a strategy. It was the big picture of the overall objective. Tactics were those things that took place on the beach itself, where that you're engaging with the enemy here, and now we need to shift a little bit this way, or we need to rethink and do this way, and it's those in the midst of circumstances. So tactics are closer to the actual action, I guess, for lack of a better term, than what a strategy would be. Our strategy is that we want to evangelize our community for Christ. Our tactics is how we do that door to door, place to place, individual to individual. It may change, it may shift. And part of a tactical approach is that we have to train ourselves to be very careful listeners. We really have to listen twice as much as anything else, so that we can have a very thoughtful response. We need to pay attention so that we can adapt to whatever new information may be there. And it's similar to the difference between a chess match and a one-on-one basketball game. Okay, we'll just put it in that genre for a minute. Now, Max, if you and I are playing chess, okay, it's your knowledge against my knowledge, and there's no time frame as far as how long it takes us to decide how we're going to move, right? But if you and I are playing one-on-one basketball, chances are the decisions that we make are a lot faster and a lot quicker, depending upon who we're facing and what their skills level are, right? Whether or not they're going to charge us, or whether they're going to try and shoot around us, or pass, or all of that. Same thing being the case here. We're not talking about manipulation. And I don't want us to misunderstand this. We're not talking about being manipulative in any way at all. Not tricks, not a slick ruse, not some clever plot to try and corner someone and embarrass them. That's not our goal. Quite frankly, there's so much foolishness that's going on in our society today. We don't need to help them embarrass themselves. They're doing a pretty good job of it. What we're at is an approach that can quickly show people how foolish some of their ideas are. Being careful not to use our tactics to assault them in a vindictive way, but simply to use them as a means of revealing, even by mirroring back to them what they're trying to say and how it really doesn't hold any water. So, we're looking for clever ways to take somebody else's bad thinking or lack of thinking for the purpose of guiding them into truth. That's what tactics are. To manage a conversation, not to manipulate a conversation. To convince somebody, not to coerce somebody. To be able to finesse a conversation, not fight our way through a conversation. Two words of encouragement, because when we think about this and having any conversation with people, we immediately get nervous, don't we? Oh, I could never do that. I could never sit down and talk with, I don't have all the knowledge. Well, welcome to the club. Nobody has all of the knowledge. We just don't. But two things as far as encouragement. First of all, facts and sound reason are always on our side. True facts, facts that can be verified, facts that are valid, and sound reasoning are always on our side. We always have those two friends accompanying us in any conversation. Most people, even the quote-unquote smart people, don't give much thought to their opposition to Christianity or to Christian principles at all. All they're doing is aping back what they've been programmed to ape back. They're giving the rhetoric. And it really is an amazing thing that a lot of people who are intelligent people, they're academic people, they're professional people, They make foolish and they make fundamental mistakes in thinking that when it comes to spiritual things, that they don't have to really think it through. But facts and the opportunities that we have reasoning are always on our side. The other thing is this. If Christianity is truth, then no matter how convincing the other side may sound at first, there will always be a fly in the ointment somewhere. There will always be a mistake in thinking. There will always be a wayward fact that eventually will show up. What we have to do is keep looking for it. Okay? We're involved, Jim and I are involved in some kind of a conversation, and it may be a conversation, we'll just say it's a conversation about cars. Okay? And Jim may say this, and I have responded by saying something else. And before you know it, Jim is asking enough questions to reveal the fact that I have no idea what in the world I'm talking about. And he would be right. But eventually, it will come to light. Eventually, the fly in the ointment will surface. Eventually, their faulty reasoning will reveal itself for what it is. And then they have to deal with it. Either they get mad and then they make it personal, right? Isn't that what a lot of folks do? When you call them on something and you've got the goods on them and they know it, then they make it personal. Well, you're just mean-spirited, Cliff. You're just not a compassionate person. You're this and you're that, and the truth of the matter is, it's not anything about you. The fact is, they can't defend their position. And so when you can't defend your position, you make it personal you attack the messenger. See? But we also have to keep in mind that there is an art to this process. Learning any craft takes time. I go back to the example of cars, all right? Jim, how long have you been messing with cars? 50 years, okay? All right. 50 years. You've learned a lot over 50 years. You've seen a lot of change in 50 years. You've been able to paint a history, practically, of different changes that have come and gone in cars and the manufacture and engine and how this is built and all of that different stuff. So yes, it takes time to learn a craft. Jeremy, you're an electrician. How many years have you been an electrician? Okay, since 98. Ryan, how many years is that? About 25 years. Okay. Celebrate your silver jubilee here before you know it. So yeah, even in that, you didn't know everything from the very get-go. And we could go around and we could say that about all of us in one form or another. It takes time, it takes effort to focus, it takes practice to turn what could be a volatile situation into an opportunity. And that's what we want to do with tactics when we talk to people. We don't want to fight with people. We don't want to fight with people. We just want to be able to engage in an intelligent conversation, hopefully so that people will see the error of their foolish and unfactual and unsubstantiated thinking. and get them to think about something else. Strategy involves seeing the big picture, and the details of engagement and the art of navigating through a conversation itself is the important thing. There's also something else that we need to be conscious of, and that is that using tactics can be dangerous. It can be dangerous. Again, we're not talking about manipulative tricks or a clever ploy to belittle someone, to humiliate someone. That's not it. We're trying to use tools to gain an opportunity to maneuver and expose somebody else's bad thinking and to guide them toward truth. Because we don't want to just leave them there, lying in their bad thinking. We want to turn them around. Boy, oh boy, perhaps one of the greatest people, biblically speaking, that is an example of this is the Apostle Paul, isn't it? Oh my. Think of how many times Paul used different tactics for different audiences. Oh, yes. Oh, yes, he did. He did. Even at times when he himself was the captive. Yeah, right? Here's Paul before Herod. Herod is what? He's the Jewish king. He's a puppet king. We know that. But Herod is this king. And so Paul, speaking to Herod, is speaking from the history of the Jews. And he's looking at it from that historical standpoint. Paul, speaking to the centurion who rescues him from a beating in Ephesus, is speaking to him as a citizen of the empire. Paul, speaking to the philosophers in Athens on Mars Hill, is quoting Aristotle. And he's gaining a hearing in front of this group of eggheads. So here we have. Now, what is Paul doing in all those cases? Well, eventually he's presenting the gospel. And he's presenting the fact that all of these things lead up to the person and work of Jesus Christ. But his entree into each of those circumstances is unique to the situation. He uses different tactics all along the way. And that's what we're talking about as well. And so as we move forward in this, we're going to be able to see how some of these things fit right in and are not as overwhelming and threatening as they appear to be as we move forward in our tactics. Right, Max? Okay. All right. Thoughts, questions? I would absolutely agree. Yes. Yeah. Don't want to hear it. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then it'll be too late. Yep. So, as Grandpa used to say, make hay while the sun shines. Right? Make sense, Max? Make hay while the sun shines? Think about it. Think about it really hard. Don't Google it. That's not fair. And don't ask your AI because they might kill you. But you think about that. Make hay while the sun shines. All right, that's it for today. We'll pick it up next week.